Back in 2013, there was this Silicon Valley startup that, well, they raised over $100 million to build a juice machine.
Oh, right. I remember this. 100 million for a juicer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it was like this absolute marvel of modern engineering. It had custom microprocessors, a Wi-Fi connection, and it used, I think, 400 pounds of force to press these custom packets of diced fruit.
Which is just wild when you really think about it.
It is. It was the ultimate, high-tech intervention for what is supposedly a really complex problem, making a glass of juice.
Right, because clearly humanity had been struggling with juice up until that point.
Exactly. But then, just a few years later, investors realized you could literally just take those proprietary juice packets, squeeze them with your bare hands, and get the exact same result.
And half the time, probably.
Yeah, and half the time. And it just goes to show that we have this fundamental, almost magnetic attraction to over-engineering stuff.
We really do. We assume that if a system is struggling, the solution absolutely has to be expensive, highly complex, and, technologically advanced.
Which brings us to today. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are challenging that exact bias.
It's an incredibly pervasive mindset, too. I
Yeah.
mean, whether you're looking at corporate restructuring or software architecture or even urban planning,
Right.
our default setting is always to combat any sort of systemic opacity with overwhelming mechanical complexity. We just equate the sophistication of the tool with the quality of the outcome.
Yeah, we really do. And for you listening to this deep dive right now, our mission today is to explore a profound counter-argument to that exact mindset.
And we have a really fascinating piece of source material for this.
We do. We are looking at a journal entry from an author named Ang, and it's dated June 20th, 2026.
Such a specific source.
I know, right?
Yep.
The title is literally Notes on Fishkeeping, Part 275.
Part 275, that is dedication.
Yeah, we are using this really focused niche snippet of daily life because it just flawlessly illustrates that central tension. The tension between over-engineered tech interventions and the raw, kind of overlooked power of organic functional capacity.
And, we really should highlight right away the level of empirical rigor that something like Part 275 implies.
Oh, totally.
This is an author who has spent just an immense amount of time observing isolated ecosystems.
Yeah, when you log 275 detailed entries about, managing aquatic environments, you aren't just guessing anymore.
Exactly. You're no longer operating on panic. You're iterating. You're actively testing variables.
Right.
You've essentially developed this methodology of patience that, frankly, most modern management theories completely lack.
Okay, let's unpack this, because
Sure.
the actual situation Ang is documenting here starts with what is basically a systemic bottleneck.
Right, a classic scaling issue.
Yeah, Ang is attempting to clear space for new species, essentially trying to scale up the whole operation. But a major variable has destabilized: the water.
Exactly. The water in the primary tank has become, in Ang's exact words, rather cloudy.
Rather cloudy.
Yeah. Now, let's step out of the literal water for a second, right? Think about a massive data migration project that is completely bogged down.
Oh, yeah, the worst.
Or a supply chain that has suddenly just lost all its transparency. The visibility is totally gone. You are dealing with entirely murky variables.
It's systemic opacity. You can no longer clearly see the interactions happening within the environment.
Exactly.
When that happens in a high-stakes environment, the impulse is almost always destructive, right? Leaders want to just drain the metaphorical tank.
Right, they panic.
They want to scrap the legacy code, fire the vendor, and purchase this massive multi-tiered enterprise software solution just to, force clarity back into the system.
Force it, yeah. The cloudy environment basically triggers a panic response.
Yeah.
And that panic demands a heavy-handed, high-tech intervention.
But Ang completely sidesteps that panic response.
Completely. The journal notes some brief cleaning and water changes, which is like the equivalent of basic administrative hygiene.
Right, exactly. And then it details this totally pivotal decision. Ang installs a low-tech, super unassuming piece of porous media.
A basic sponge filter.
Literally just a basic sponge filter placed right in its usual spot.
Yeah.
There are no motorized chemical reactors, no advanced UV clarifiers.
Nothing like that.
It is quite literally just a piece of foam connected to an airline.
Which is just a beautifully restrained intervention. I mean, Ang is dealing with a failing system, but chooses a mechanism that is practically prehistoric in technological terms.
Prehistoric.
But the brilliance is in the deployment.
Yeah.
Aang isn't just treating a symptom here.
Right. It's not a Band-Aid.
No, this combination of an initial reset like the water change,
Mm-hmm.
followed by the reintroduction of this continuous, reliable, low-tech tool, it's designed to reestablish a sustainable baseline.
Yeah.
It's a structural intervention that is cleverly disguised as a trivial one.
And the outcome is what makes this so incredibly compelling. Because according to the entry, but the very next day, the results were just staggering.
Overnight results.
Yeah, the murky, compromised environment hadn't just, marginally improved. Aang notes absolute amazement that the water had become, quote, crystal clear overnight.
Which is amazing.
There's even photographic evidence referenced in the log. To go from systemic failure to total clarity in 24 hours using, like, a piece of foam, it just feels almost impossible.
Well, it indicates that the intervention directly addressed the root cause of the environmental collapse,
Right.
rather than just acting as that superficial bandage we talked about.
Right.
The speed of that recovery really tells us that the biological infrastructure was just rapidly restabilized.
Now, I have to stop you there and push back on this narrative a little bit.
Okay, sorry, sir.
Because I am looking at the sequence of events that Aang actually documented. We have the brief cleaning and water changes, right?
Sure.
And then we have the installation of the new sponge. Well, in a corporate environment, if a company does a mass layoff and simultaneously introduces a new project management software,
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
the executives always credit the new software for their sudden profitability, right?
Always.
But in reality, it was just the brutal cost-cutting of the layoff. So how do we know Aang isn't falling for that exact same trap?
That's a fair point.
Why isn't the rapid clarity simply the result of manually removing the dirty water? Why are we crediting the foam?
Well, what's fascinating here is that Aang actually anticipates exactly that skepticism.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and Aang points directly to the underlying physics of the solution, which is functional capacity through surface area.
Okay, surface area.
The water change was the immediate reset, absolutely. No one is denying that.
Right.
But Aang explicitly credits the sustained clarity to the fact that even a physically small piece of porous foam possesses this massive, hidden, large surface area.
Surface area is one of those concepts that, it sounds really simple, but it rarely gets fully appreciated.
Very true.
Because we tend to judge the power of a tool by its physical footprint.
Hmm.
A massive, roaring server rack just looks way more powerful than a quiet little solid-state drive.
Exactly.
So explain to everyone why the surface area of this specific low-tech intervention is the actual hero here.
Okay, so we have to look at the microarchitecture. From the outside, sure, a sponge is just a small cylinder taking up a tiny corner of the tank.
Just a little blob of foam.
Right. But internally, it is this dense fractal labyrinth. It contains thousands upon thousands of microscopic walls, tunnels, and interconnected chambers.
Wow.
If you were to mathematically unfold all that internal geometry and lay it completely flat, the actual physical space available would be exponential compared to its external volume.
So it's basically about invisible real estate.
Exactly. Invisible real estate.
It's providing this massive foundation that you simply cannot see with the naked eye.
Precisely. And in this specific context, that invisible real estate is what actually houses the biological filtration.
Right, the bacteria.
Yes. Microscopic beneficial bacteria need a physical structure to anchor themselves to. So the more surface area you have, the larger the bacterial colony you can support.
And those are the guys doing the actual work.
Exactly. Those colonies are what actually consume the particulate matter and the invisible toxins that are causing the murkiness.
So Aang recognizes that this low-tech foam is secretly just a piece of massive, high-capacity infrastructure.
It really is a masterclass in prioritizing functional capacity over physical complexity.
That completely reframes the whole concept of a, quote, simple solution. It's not simple because it lacks capability.
No, not at all.
It's simple because its complexity is structural and internal rather than mechanical.
Yes, beautifully put.
And the text shows Aang leaning entirely into this realization. The journal reads, and I quote, "This serves as a reminder that to maintain water quality, nothing is more effective or affordable provided you keep it running."
Provided you keep it running. That is the crucial caveat that makes this entire philosophy work.
Right, you can't just unplug it.
No, a highly functional, low-tech solution is utterly dependent on consistency. You cannot toggle it on and off based on quarterly whims.
Right.
The internal ecosystem relies on a continuous flow to survive. It's really the exact opposite of that move fast and break things tech mentality.
Yeah, it requires the discipline of mundane, continuous operation.
Exactly.
But, I am still playing devil's advocate here
Go for it.
because that works perfectly for one isolated tank.
Sure.
But what happens when the environment scales up? Complex, modern problems are rarely isolated, right? We exist in interconnected networks.
You do.
So surely, as a system grows, the low-tech solution eventually breaks down and demands that expensive high-tech intervention we talked about earlier.
Well, that is definitely the standard assumption of organizational scaling. We naturally assume that a 10 times larger operation requires a tool that is 10 times more complex.
Right. Well, here's where it gets really interesting because Aang does scale up.
Oh, big time.
Yeah, the journal details a massive expansion plan. The observation from that single tank was so definitive that Aang decides to just systematize the entire operation.
But not in the way you'd expect.
Right, because instead of buying increasingly complex, individualized filtration units with, like, digital sensors and proprietary media for every single new tank.
Which would cost a fortune.
Exactly. Aang relies on systems design. The text notes the purchase of a single large air pump to drive these basic, low-tech sponge units across multiple environments.
It's so smart.
So far, 2 are outfitted, with 7 more slated for the exact same treatment.
It is an extraordinarily elegant architectural decision. Aang has centralized the power source.
The large air pump.
Right, but completely decentralized the actual processing nodes.
Yes.
By using one robust central engine to push air through 9 separate, virtually unbreakable physical sponges, Aang has basically created a distributed network of high functional capacity.
It's like edge computing.
It's exactly like edge computing.
Or a decentralized management structure, where the central office provides the operational budget, but leaves the actual localized problem solving to small, highly efficient, independent teams.
Exactly. Because if one individual sponge clogs up, the rest of the network remains entirely unaffected.
Right, the system survives.
But if you had invested in a single, massive, over-engineered, centralized water filtration plant, well, a single point of failure brings down the entire 9-tank ecosystem.
Wow, yeah.
Aang's approach of scaling a low-tech, high-surface area intervention provides profound systemic resilience. It's affordable, it's scalable, and it is largely immune to catastrophic cascading failure.
It's brilliant. But just when you think Aang is going to uniformly apply this brilliant new systems architecture across the board,
There's a twist.
there's an exception. Out of all the environments being managed, the entry explicitly states that 2 specific tanks are being left entirely alone.
Which is wild.
They are totally exempt from the grand, scalable master plan.
Which really demonstrates a level of environmental restraint that is almost unheard of when someone finds a solution they're excited about.
Oh, for sure. People love a magic bullet.
Right, they want to apply it to everything.
But the entry explains that in these 2 specific cases, the mechanical intervention is deemed unnecessary.
Unnecessary.
Yeah. And the reason given, these environments possess a thriving duckweed population.
Duckweed.
Yeah. For those listening who haven't, studied aquatic botany lately, duckweed is this very small, rapidly reproducing plant that basically just flakes on the surface of the water.
Right.
And Aang's hypothesis is that this thriving plant life basically acts as a self-sustaining natural system that independently maintains the environmental clarity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's so important. We are transitioning from a discussion about efficient mechanical engineering to a lesson in organic self-regulation.
Yeah.
Because up until this point, Aang has successfully utilized a mechanical intervention, right? The air pumping through the porous media. But here, Aang recognizes the power of biology.
Can we dig into the actual mechanics of that for a second?
Sure.
How does a tiny floating leaf do the job of a physical piece of infrastructure? Like, we talked about the internal labyrinth of the sponge. What is the duckweed actually doing to process those murky variables?
Okay, so it comes down to the biology of phytoremediation.
Phytoremediation.
Yeah. Basically, in any closed environment with living organisms, waste is constantly being generated.
Yeah, naturally.
Specifically, nitrogenous waste like ammonia, which is highly toxic and causes those murky, cloudy imbalances.
Right, the cloudiness.
In the mechanical setup, the bacteria living on the sponge convert that ammonia into slightly less toxic compounds, which eventually need to be diluted with water changes.
Okay, got it.
But duckweed bypasses that entire mechanical cycle. Its root structures hang directly into the water column and act as aggressive organic nutrient sinks.
Wait, so they're literally eating the problem.
They are consuming the nitrogenous waste directly as fertilizer to fuel their own rapid growth.
Whack.
It is a completely closed-loop biological system. The waste produced by the environment is the exact fuel required by the duckweed to expand its own functional capacity.
That is incredible.
It doesn't trap the waste, it transmutes it into biomass.
It transmutes it. That is just wow. And it makes Aang's restraint even more impressive, honestly.
Well, absolutely.
Because you have this shiny new central air pump, you have the momentum of outfitting all these other systems. I mean, the natural human urge is to standardize, right?
Right, everyone wants uniformity.
Corporate leaders do this constantly. They find a management framework that works for, say, the sales team, and they violently force it onto the engineering team, completely ignoring the fact that the engineers already had a thriving, self-regulating culture.
We call it the standardization trap. We just hate anomalies in our system.
You really do.
We want everything to run on the exact same protocol because, well, it looks cleaner on a spreadsheet. But Aang looks at the two duckweed environments and essentially says, I possess a highly efficient tool, but I refuse to deploy it here because the organic infrastructure is already fundamentally sound.
It is the ultimate exercise in active monitoring versus unnecessary meddling.
Exactly.
You do not install artificial infrastructure where the organic environment has already solved the problem for you.
Right.
Though, I do appreciate the very end of the journal entry. Aang isn't completely blinded by idealism here.
No, not at all.
Because the final note on the duckweed strategy is, and I quote, "Nevertheless, we will see how this fares in the coming weeks."
Because an empirical observer never assumes a system is permanently fixed.
Never.
The biological closed loop of the duckweed is highly effective today, sure, but environments are dynamic. The commitment is always to the outcome, clarity and systemic health.
Not the method.
Right, not a rigid allegiance to the method itself. If the plant population crashes or the variables shift, Aang is fully prepared to intervene. Restraint is not the same as neglect.
Restraint is not neglect.
That's a great point. So what does this all mean? I mean, we started by talking about $100 million juice machines and our obsession with over-engineering. And we've journeyed through this incredibly niche journal entry about aquatic maintenance. How do we actually distill these principles into actionable insights for the systems we manage every day?
I think there are two massive structural takeaways here. First, we have to completely reevaluate how we measure the power of a solution.
Good.
The secret of the porous media teaches us that functional capacity is far more important than physical or technological complexity.
Definitely.
When dealing with systemic opacity, those cloudy, murky problems, a consistent, low-tech intervention with immense internal surface area will almost always outperform a fragile, overly complex system.
The power of invisible, reliable real estate. Exactly. And the second takeaway is the absolute necessity of contextual restraint. You must cultivate the wisdom to know the difference between a failing system that requires an intervention and a self-regulating organic system that simply needs to be left alone to do its work.
Yeah.
Standardization is often the enemy of efficiency if it destroys your naturally occurring problem-solving ecosystems.
Active monitoring without unnecessary meddling.
Right.
And for you listening right now, these principles are just universally applicable. Whether you are building a software platform, restructuring a department, or simply trying to organize the chaotic variables of your own daily schedule.
Which is hard enough.
Right. You are going to face systemic breakdown. The variables will get cloudy. The instinct will be to panic, to scrap everything, and to invest heavily in the most complex, highly marketed overhaul you can possibly find.
And that is precisely the moment you need to pause. You need to look for the structural, low-tech interventions that merely require consistency to work.
Yeah, you have to ask yourself if you are trying to force a mechanical solution onto an environment that already possesses the organic infrastructure to heal itself.
And you must be willing to let go of the aesthetic of complexity in favor of the quiet, unglamorous reality of functional capacity.
Absolutely. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to explore on your own.
Okay.
Because we've spent this entire time operating under the assumption that a cloudy system is inherently a failing system that must be pushed toward immediate clarity.
Right. That's been the premise.
But consider this. What if the murkiness isn't a failure at all?
Oh, interesting.
In nature and in business, periods of intense transition, creative brainstorming, or even market correction, they are inherently chaotic and opaque. They are murky by design.
That's very true.
So take a look at the most confusing, opaque system in your life right now. Are you absolutely certain it is a problem that requires filtering? Or are you looking at a system in the middle of a necessary generative transformation, and the most dangerous thing you could possibly do is prematurely force it to be clear?